My ex chose money over me and called me not enough. Years later, she tried to come back into my life, but I made sure she regretted it. So, 5 years ago, my life completely fell apart in a single conversation. I was dating this girl, Jessica. We'd been together for almost 2 years, and I thought everything was fine. Sure, I wasn't doing amazing at the time. I was 24, working a boring 9-to-5 that barely paid the bills, and driving this beat-up Honda Civic that had more duct tape than paint. But I thought we were solid. One night, she sits me down all serious, and I swear I thought she was gonna tell me she cheated or something. Nope. Instead, she starts with, "I can't do this anymore." I'm sitting there, dumbfounded, and asked her, "What do you mean? What's wrong?" And that's when she hits me with it. "You're a loser, Mark. You have no ambition. You're broke, and you're just not going anywhere." I didn't even know what to say. I mean, yeah, I wasn't exactly thriving, but I was working on myself. I had plans. I tried to explain that to her, but she just rolled her eyes. Then she said, "Look, I need a man who can take care of me. Someone who's already got their life together. Not someone who's stuck in neutral." The worst part? She wasn't even sad. She looked almost relieved to get it off her chest. Before leaving, she threw out one last jab. "Maybe once you get your act together, we can talk. But for now, you're just not enough for me." She walked out, and I just sat there, completely wrecked. Turns out, she already moved on to this guy Brandon, some finance bro with a shiny BMW and a trust fund. Classic. At the time, it felt like the end of the world. I lost Jessica, my confidence was in the gutter, and I didn't even want to go to work the next day. Little did I know, that breakup would be the best thing to ever happen to me. After Jessica left, I hit rock bottom. I didn't want to admit it, but her words got under my skin. Loser, poor. Not enough. It was like they were on repeat in my head. For weeks, I barely slept, ate garbage, and honestly just went through the motions. I even considered texting her, begging her to take me back, but thankfully, I had enough self-respect not to do that. One night, though, everything changed. I was scrolling through Instagram, torturing myself by looking at Jessica's profile. Rookie mistake, I know. There she was, all smiles with Brandon at some rooftop bar, flaunting her new life. He had his arm around her, and in the caption, she'd written, "Love my life with this amazing man, #blessed, #level up." That was the moment. Something in me just snapped. I don't even know how to describe it. It was like all the hurt, the self-pity, the anger, it morphed into this fiery determination. I looked at that photo, clenched my jaw, and thought, all right. You want to call me a loser? Fine. But one day, you're gonna eat those words. The very next morning, I got up early and made a list. I wrote down everything I wanted to change about my life. Quit my dead-end job. Start my own business. Get in shape. Save enough to buy a decent car, because let's face it, the Civic wasn't cutting it. I didn't know how I was going to do any of it, but I was done sitting around feeling sorry for myself. I started with the business idea. I'd always been decent with computers, and I had this idea for a local IT support company, basically helping small businesses fix their tech problems. I figured, what did I have to lose? Nights and weekends became all about researching, building a website, and cold calling potential clients. It wasn't easy. The first few months were brutal. I barely slept, got rejected constantly, and there were days I thought maybe Jessica was right, maybe I really was just a loser. But then, my first client came through, a mom-and-pop bakery whose Wi-Fi kept crashing. After that, it was like a domino effect. Word spread, and before I knew it, I was actually making progress. And this was just the beginning. The first year was pure grind. I was still working my 9-to-5 during the day, then spending evenings and weekends on my IT business. There were nights I'd pass out at my desk, surrounded by half-eaten microwave dinners and empty coffee mugs. But little by little, things started to click. Word-of-mouth referrals were my secret weapon. That bakery? They recommended me to a few other small businesses in the area. Pretty soon, I was juggling 5 or 6 clients a week, fixing everything from busted routers to setting up entire networks. It wasn't glamorous, but it was progress. By the second year, I had enough clients to finally quit my job. That was terrifying, by the way, leaving the one stable thing in my life to dive headfirst into the unknown. But it turned out to be the best decision I'd ever made. Once I could focus full-time on the business, things exploded. I hired 2 part-time employees to help with the workload, upgraded my tools, and even rented a tiny office space. Okay, it was basically a closet, but it felt legit. Around this time, I also started taking better care of myself. I hit the gym regularly, not to get revenge hot or anything dramatic, but because I wanted to feel good in my own skin. I traded fast food for meal prep, swapped beer for water, and for the first time in my life, I felt in control. Then, in year 3, everything changed. I landed a contract with a mid-sized marketing firm in town. It was my biggest client yet, worth more money in a month than I used to make in half a year. That deal let me expand my team, invest in better equipment, and start offering more services. By year 4, my little IT side hustle had turned into a full-blown business. We weren't just fixing routers anymore. We were managing IT infrastructure for dozens of companies, and I had a team of 10 people working for me. I'd also moved out of my crummy one-bedroom apartment into a modern loft downtown. Oh, and I finally upgraded the Civic to a sleek Tesla. Life was good. Actually, life was great. But what I didn't realize was that fate wasn't done with me yet. Because that's when Jessica walked back into my life. It all started at a coffee shop. I was grabbing a quick espresso between meetings when I heard someone say, "Mark? Oh my God, is that you?" I turned around, and there she was, Jessica. She looked exactly the same. Still drop-dead gorgeous, still dressed like she walked out of a fashion magazine, and still had that slightly condescending smirk I remembered all too well. "Jessica," I said, trying to sound casual, but honestly I was stunned. I hadn't seen her in almost 5 years. "I almost didn't recognize you," she said, giving me this once-over like she was trying to process the fact that I wasn't the same broke, insecure guy she dumped. "You look different." "Yeah, well," I said, shrugging. "A lot's changed." She smiled, but it had this weird edge to it, like she wasn't sure how to play this. "What are you up to these days? Still at that office job?" That was my cue. "Actually, no. I run my own business now. It's an IT solutions company. Keeps me pretty busy." Her eyes widened just a little. "Wow. That's impressive." I could see the gears turning in her head, but I didn't let the conversation linger. I told her I had a meeting to get to, which was true, and said goodbye, feeling weirdly triumphant as I walked out. I thought that was it. Just a random run-in. But a week later, I got a friend request from her on Facebook. Then a message. "Hey, it was so nice seeing you the other day. I'd love to catch up more if you're free sometime." I'll admit, part of me wanted to ignore it. But the petty part? The part that still remembered her calling me a loser? That part wanted to see where this was going. So I replied, "Sure, let's catch up." A few days later, Jessica and I met for dinner at this trendy spot downtown. She was the one who picked it, and I didn't mind. After all, I could actually afford it now. When she walked in, it felt like one of those movie moments. She was dressed to kill, all smiles, and acting like we were old friends catching up. The hostess seated us, and almost immediately, Jessica dove into small talk. "You've really changed, Mark," she said, swirling her wine. "I mean in a good way. You seem so confident now." I shrugged, trying not to look smug. "Well, starting your own business will do that." She asked a million questions about my company, how I started it, how it was going, what kind of clients I had. I kept my answers polite but vague, not wanting to give her the satisfaction of knowing just how successful I'd become. But then, she started steering the conversation in a more personal direction. "So, are you seeing anyone?" she asked, leaning in slightly. I didn't miss the hopeful tone in her voice. I kept my expression neutral and said, "Not seriously. I've been pretty focused on work." She nodded, looking almost relieved. "That's understandable. You've built something amazing for yourself. Honestly, I always knew you had potential." I almost choked on my drink. Always knew I had potential. The same woman who dumped me because I was going nowhere? But I played it cool. Thanks, I said, keeping my tone even. Then she dropped the bombshell. You know, I've been thinking about us. How we ended things. I raised an eyebrow. Oh yeah? She sighed dramatically, as if she were carrying the weight of the world. I think I made a mistake, Mark. You've become exactly the kind of man I always wanted. Ambitious, successful, confident. You're everything I hoped you'd be. If this had been 5 years ago, I probably would have melted right there. But now, all I felt was this strange mix of amusement and vindication. I leaned back in my chair and gave her a small smile. That's interesting to hear. She looked at me expectantly, like she was waiting for me to swoop in and say, let's pick up where we left off. But I wasn't done yet. I let her words hang in the air for a moment, sipping my drink to keep her waiting. Then I said, It's funny you say that, Jess. I've been thinking about how we ended too. Her eyes lit up, like she thought she had me. Really? Yeah, I said, leaning forward slightly. You were right back then. I was stuck. That breakup? It pushed me to be better. Her smile grew, but I wasn't done. But you know what's crazy? If you hadn't dumped me, I probably wouldn't be here now. So, in a way, I owe you one. The smile faltered. Oh, me? She repeated, confused. Yeah. Because you showed me exactly what kind of person I don't want in my life. Her jaw dropped slightly, but I didn't give her a chance to recover. I flagged the waiter, paid the bill, yep, I covered it, and stood up. Good catching up, Jess. Take care. Then I walked out, leaving her sitting there stunned. The second I walked out of that restaurant, I felt a rush of satisfaction like nothing I'd ever experienced. For years, I'd replayed that breakup in my head, imagining what I'd say if I ever got the chance. And now? I'd said it. But it didn't end there. The next day, Jessica messaged me again. Long paragraph. She went on about how she missed what we had, and how she made a mistake leaving me. She even wrote, I think we could have a second chance if you're willing to forgive me. I laughed out loud. Not because I was mad, at this point I wasn't, but because it was so transparent. She didn't want me. She wanted the life she thought I could give her now. I didn't reply. Instead, I deleted the message and blocked her. That should have been the end of it, but a week later, mutual friends started messaging me. Apparently, Jessica had been telling people we were working things out. I set the record straight real quick. Nope. Not happening. We're done. And honestly, it felt incredible to finally be the one calling the shots. After I blocked Jessica, I figured that was the last I'd hear from her. But of course, word spread. Mutual friends, people I hadn't talked to in years, started coming out of the woodwork. Hey, I heard about you and Jessica getting back together. Is it true? Dude, congrats on your business. Jessica must feel lucky to have you again. It was like she'd launched some PR campaign to save face. Every time I corrected someone, I could hear the disbelief in their voice. Wait, so she tried to get back with you, and you said no? Yep. That's exactly what happened. The funny thing is, this drama brought attention to my business. People in our hometown started noticing me, not the broke guy from years ago, but the guy who turned it all around. I got a few new clients just from people hearing my story. One even joked, if you can survive Jessica, you can probably fix our entire IT department. By year 5, I was at a place I never imagined. I'd expanded my company to multiple cities, hired a full-time team, and was pulling in numbers I used to dream about. And Jessica? From what I heard, her shiny finance bro Brandon crashed and burned. His company let him go, and he moved back in with his parents. Guess that level up didn't last long. Life has a funny way of balancing the scales, doesn't it? About a month after all the Jessica drama settled, I got an email from someone I hadn't spoken to in years. It was Brandon. Yeah, that Brandon, the guy Jessica left me for. He wrote this long-winded message saying he'd heard about my success and wanted to connect, because he was looking for opportunities after being laid off. The audacity, right? I stared at the email for a good minute, then replied with just one line. Sorry, I'm not hiring. No explanation, no small talk. Just that. Petty? Maybe. But man, it felt good. A few months later, my company was hosting a tech conference in town. It was a big deal. Industry leaders, local businesses, and even some media outlets were attending. I was the keynote speaker, and honestly, it was one of the proudest moments of my life. As I was wrapping up my talk, I spotted someone in the crowd. Jessica. She was sitting in the back, trying to blend in, but there was no mistaking her. After the event, during the networking session, she came up to me. "Mark, your speech was amazing. You've come so far." "Thanks," I said, keeping it professional. She lingered for a moment, then added, "I was wondering if we could talk privately. Maybe grab a drink sometime?" I smiled politely and replied, "Sorry, Jessica. My schedule's packed. But I appreciate the support." Then, I excused myself to chat with a group of CEOs who were interested in partnering with my company. The look on her face. Priceless. After the conference, I couldn't stop thinking about that moment with Jessica. Not because I cared, but because it felt like the perfect full-circle moment. The guy she called a loser was now someone she was chasing. But here's the best part. I wasn't even focused on her anymore. My life was too good. My business was thriving. I'd just opened a second office in another city, and I was traveling more than I ever imagined. I'd also met someone new. Her name was Emily. She was smart, driven, and kind, with zero interest in materialistic nonsense. We met through mutual friends, and our connection felt effortless, like the complete opposite of my relationship with Jessica. One night, Emily and I were out for dinner, and guess who walked into the same restaurant? Yep, Jessica. She saw us, froze for a second, and then turned and walked right back out. I didn't say a word about it to Emily. It wasn't worth it. Success wasn't just the best revenge, it was the life I'd always wanted. After that night, I didn't hear much about Jessica anymore. She seemed to finally get the message that whatever we had was long gone. Honestly, I wasn't even keeping tabs on her at this point. Emily and I kept growing closer. She wasn't impressed by the fancy car or the big business. She cared about me, the person. It was refreshing. She actually asked me about my goals, not just professionally, but in life, and it made me realize how much I'd been craving something real. Meanwhile, my business kept expanding. I'd just signed a huge contract with a national chain, which felt surreal considering where I started. My team joked about me needing my own rags to riches documentary. But here's the thing, I wasn't doing it for revenge anymore. What started as a fire to prove people wrong had turned into something bigger. I wasn't just building a business, I was building a life I could be proud of. And the best part? I didn't need validation from anyone, especially Jessica. Just when I thought Jessica was out of my life for good, I got an email from an unexpected sender, her. The subject line read, "I need your help." I almost deleted it without opening it, but curiosity got the better of me. In the email, she explained how things had gone downhill for her. Brandon's career never recovered, and they broke up. She was struggling to find stable work and was, in her words, reaching out to people who've been successful. She ended the email with this: "I know I wasn't fair to you in the past, but I've always admired your drive. If there's any way you can help me, job opportunities, advice, anything, I'd be forever grateful." I stared at the screen for a long time. 5 years ago, I would have jumped at the chance to show her up or rub it in her face. But now, I didn't feel anger or even pity. I just felt nothing. I replied with 2 sentences. "Jessica, I wish you the best in finding your path. Unfortunately, I'm unable to help." Then I hit send and deleted the email. After sending that email, I felt a sense of finality I hadn't expected. It wasn't about revenge anymore. Jessica didn't matter in my life, not in the way she used to. A week later, I was at a company event when one of my employees came up to me. "Hey, this is random, but do you know a Jessica? She applied for a temp role we posted." I laughed, caught completely off guard. "Jessica who?" He pulled up her resume on his phone. Yep, it was her. Same Jessica. For a moment, I thought about rejecting it outright. But then, I made a different choice. "Let HR handle it like any other application," I said. "No special treatment." A few days later, I got word that her application was denied. She didn't meet the minimum qualifications. I didn't interfere, didn't say a word. It was poetic, though, knowing that even if she wanted to be a part of my world, she simply didn't fit. That was the closure I didn't know I needed. After that, Jessica became nothing more than a distant memory. Life had moved on, and so had I. My business was thriving, I was traveling regularly for work and leisure, and Emily and I were growing stronger every day. One night, while Emily and I were sitting on the balcony of our new home, watching the sunset, she asked me something. "Do you ever think about your past? Like the people who didn't believe in you?" I smiled, shaking my head. "Not really. I used to, but now? I'm just grateful it all happened the way it did. It pushed me to become who I am today." She leaned her head on my shoulder, and I realized how far I'd come, not just in terms of success, but in letting go of the things that didn't matter. Revenge had felt sweet in the moment, but the real reward was building a life I loved, surrounded by people who truly cared about me. Jessica? Brandon? They were just stepping stones. My story wasn't about them. It was about me finally figuring out my worth, and never looking back.